Earlier, I was joined in the studio by Dr. Tom Lynch. He's a research fellow at the Institute of National Strategic Studies here in Washington, D.C. He is also an expert on Afghanistan. And I asked him what he thought would happen in the country after the deadline.
The mercurial Hamid Karzai and the challenges of getting resolution on many timings in Afghanistan has continued here this year. And I think the United States wished to see, largely for strategic reasons and also logistical reasons, a final decision made by today, December 31st, 2013, about a long-term commitment or a longer-term commitment for a residual force of several thousand Americans and other Western and NATO troops to stay in Afghanistan. Of course, Karzai has not gone along with that, even though he did hold a loya jirga, where a vast majority of the tribal elders agreed to the terms and conditions of the bilateral security agreement. I think Mr. Karzai, though, has got his own internal political challenges that make it difficult for him at this point to just anoint and move forward with an American agreement, largely because I think he wants to see the Taliban and Southern Pashtuns, who largely are his political support base and will be the political support base of any successor to him as a candidate, to see them come into the fold, to be negotiating and therefore being participants in the April 2014 election, and not either sit on the side or worse, corrupt and sabotage the elections, thereby giving the elections to the opponent people. I think that's part of what's playing out here. I think as a consequence of that, Elaine, I think America has, after initially pushing hard, has stepped back a little bit here and has given a little more time for this to play out. Now, I think that's going to be tougher for the military commanders because they don't have as much time to get ready to do X or Y, but I think it's more appropriate to allow things to settle a bit and have Karzai's own political constituency say, hey, we can't drag this out all the way through 2014. We need the assurance that there's going to be a remnant force here, and let's do the deal.
Well, you mentioned those 2014 presidential elections in Afghanistan. How do you see a new leader changing the dynamics of what is taking place here?
Well, I mean, it's going to be interesting because it's been a decade, basically, with Hamid Karzai as the president, and of course also a decade of very strong Western, NATO, and United States presence in Afghanistan, conducting counterinsurgency operations, conducting counterterrorist operations, and also trying to build governance and economic structure in Afghanistan. The next president's challenge is going to be to transition the country, no matter how many Western forces remain, transition the country into a more autonomous footing, an autonomous status, because a lot of the aid and assistance that America has poured in over the last decade, that's going to pull back. I'm not saying it's going to be eliminated, but it's going to pull back. And it'll pull back more if there are greater concerns about the security in the country. Therefore, that's why I think the tribal elders have agreed to the bilateral security arrangement of the notion that it's better to have some residual Western force than not going towards 2020 to give investors, to give businessmen, and to give others confidence that they can invest in Afghanistan and help it stand on its own 2 feet.